Good morning, children. We have studied very interesting play on the face of it. This is the only play that you are studying. So keep in mind that it's a very important from the examination point of view. The whole story is revolving around two important characters, and both of them are facing similar kind of situation. Despite all this, there's a one person who is very optimistic, whereas another person is very pessimistic. A great transformation comes at the end in the case of a young boy who had pessimistic outlook towards life. Let's discuss important questions on this play on the face of it. At first, let's discuss short answer type questions. Question number one. Mind the apples, says Mr. Lamb. Why do you think does he issue this instruction to whom and how many times? Mr. Lamb issues this instruction to Derry, a boy of 14, who climbs over the garden wall and enters the garden. He asks Derry twice to mind the apples, which have been blown down by the wind from the trees and strewn in the grass. He could put his foot on some apples and he may fall down. Question number two. What is the attitude of Mr. Lamb to the small boy who comes to his garden? Mr. Lamb's attitude to the small boy is quite gentle, protective, and accommodating. Like an elder in the family offering advice and instructions to the younger members, Mr. Lamb advises the young boy to mind the apples lest he should trip. He also advises the boy not to feel afraid. Question number three. What explanation does the small boy offer for coming into the garden? How does Mr. Lamb react to it? The boy thought that this was an empty place. He did not know was anybody there. Mr. Lamb assures him that it is all right. He asks the boy what he is afraid of. He tells the boy that the house is empty as he is in the garden and is likely to stay there. Such a beautiful day should not be wasted indoors. Question number 4. I'm not afraid. People are afraid of me, says Derry. What do people think on seeing his face? How did they react then? On looking at Derry's face, they find it bad and frightful. They think that it is the ugliest thing they have ever seen. They call him a poor boy, as one side of his face has been burned by acid. Some of them are afraid of his ugly and horrible face. Question number 5. How does Mr. Lamb change the subject from ugly face to ripe apples? Or how does Mr. Lamb keep himself busy when it is a bit cooler? There's a momentary pause in the conversation. Then Mr. Lamb changes the subject. He says that when it is a bit cooler, he will get the ladder and a stick. Then he'll pull down those ripe crab apples. He makes jelly. He calls these orange colored and golden apples magic fruit. September is a good time to make jelly. He tells the boy that he could help him. Question number 6. Why, according to Derry, has the old man changed the subject? Derry says that people always change the subject. They don't ask him about his physical impairment. They simply pretend that it is not true and isn't there. They don't want the boy to mind and get upset. He thinks that the old man has changed the subject because he's afraid to ask him about his burned face. Question number 7. You got burnt in a fire, says Mr. Lamb. What do you think had happened to Derry's face? Derry's face did not get burned in a fire. He got acid all down that side of his face and it burnt it all away. Derry says that this acid not only ate his face up, it also ate him up. One side of his face is ugly and it won't ever be any different. Question number 8. How does Mr. Lamb react to Derry's query? Aren't you interested? Mr. Lamb tells Derry that he's interested in anybody and anything. There's nothing God made that does not interest him. Fruit and flowers, trees and herbs, grass and weeds all interest him. Even stuff or rubbish is interesting. He finds no essential difference between a weed and another flower as both represent life, developing or growing. Question number 9. We are not the same, says Derry. How does Mr. Lamb try to convince him that there is no essential difference between them? Dairy and Mr. Lamb are both of the same species. They represent various stages of growth. Dairy is young, Mr. Lamb is old. Both suffer from the same physical impairment. Dairy has a burnt face, the old man has got a thin leg. But this physical disability is not important. What is important is that both are alive. They is standing there whereas Mr. Lamb is sitting. Question number 10. How, according to Derry, does the thin leg not trouble Mr. Lamb? What explanation does the old man offer? Derry thinks that the old man can put on trousers and cover up his thin leg. Then no one sees it. So people don't have to notice and stare at as they do at his face. Mr. Lamb replies that some people do notice and stare at his disability. Some don't. In the end, they get tired of it. Moreover, there are plenty of things to stare at. Question number 11. There's plenty of other things to stare at. Which things are worth staring at and why? According to the old man, there are plenty of things to stare at. These include crab apples, or the weeds, or a spider climbing up a silken ladder, or his tall sunflowers. All of them are beautiful and growing. They is surprised at the mention of things. Mr. Lamb tries to convince him that it is all relative. Then he mentions beauty and the beast. Question number 12. How does Derry interpret the fairy story Beauty and the Beast? Why does he feel about himself? Derry says that he has been told that story before. It teaches us that outward appearance does not matter. It is what one is inside that is important. Handsome is that handsome does. Beauty loved the monstrous beast for himself. When she kissed him, he changed into a handsome prince. No one except Derry's mother kisses him. She too kisses him on the other side of the face. He has developed a negative attitude and says he does not care if nobody ever kissed him. Question number 13. How, according to Derry, do people try to console those suffering from some physical impairment? They ask the person to look at all those people who are in pain and brave. They never cry or complain. They don't feel sorry for themselves. Then the person is asked to think of all those persons worse off than him. One might have been blinded or born deaf or confined to a wheelchair or be crazy and dribble. Since Derry has none of these disabilities, is far better placed. Question number 14. Why do these arguments fail to console Derry? Derry has developed negative attitude. He says that the arguments to console him will not make his face change. He feels more hurt and pained by the comments of persons or what he overhears. Once he heard a woman in the street whispering to another, Look at that. That's a terrible thing. That's a face only a mother could love. Derry calls it cruel of them. Question number 15. How does Mr. Lamb try to remove the baseless fears of Derry? Derry has developed withdrawal symptoms. He doesn't like being near people. Mr. Lamb tells him the story of a person who was afraid of everything in the world. So he went into his room and locked the door. He got into his bed and stayed there for a while. Then a picture fell off the wall onto his head and killed him. Now let us discuss long answer type questions. Question number 1. How does Derry behave on entering Mr. Lamb's garden? Derry does not use the gate to enter the garden. He climbs over the garden wall. His footsteps are heard as he walks slowly and hesitantly through the long grass. He is startled when Mr. Lamb asks him to mind the apples and warns that he might trip. Derry shows signs of fear and nervousness. He explains that he took it for an empty place. He felt that it was an empty place. Mr. Lamb, the old man, tells him that the house is empty till he goes inside. That beautiful day is not to be spent inside. Derry panics and says he has got to go. He becomes angry to learn that the old man was watching him. He explains his intentions. He has not come there to steal anything. When Mr. Lamb again asks him not to be afraid, he remarks that people are afraid of him because his face is ugly and frightful. Question number 2. What efforts does Mr. Lamb make to strike up a friendship with Derry, the small boy who enters his garden? So, what are the efforts of Mr. Lamb to make friendship with Derry? Mr. Lamb was all alone in his house. So, what efforts he makes to make a friendship with Derry? Mr. Lamb is quite gentle, accommodating, and protective. He asks Derry to mind the apples as he might trip. Instead of feeling angry over the way of his entry, he points out that the gate is always open and is welcome. His cordial manner and conciliatory tone touch the innermost chords of a defiant boy like Derry, who does not want to mix up with others, who always likes to keep himself aloof from all others. On learning about his burnt face, he does not react like others. Instead of exhibiting fear and repulsion, he shows understanding and affection. He admits that he's the same as the boy. If the boy has a burnt face, he has got a thin leg. So both of them have got similar conditions and both of them suffer from physical disability. Gradually tries to win over the confidence of Derry by reminding him of the story of Beast and Beauty. He then tells him the story of a man who feared everything and shut himself in a room. His positive attitude towards life inspires the boy to talk to him like a friend. Question number 3. What is the bond that unites the two? Old person Mr. Lamb and Derry the young boy. How does the old man inspire the young boy? It is the bond of physical impairment or physical disability that unites an elderly person, Mr. Lamb, and a young boy, Dee. He got his leg blown off during the war, and since then he has a thin leg. That means he has an artificial leg. Derry got one side of his face burned by acid. Their respective disabilities have not only caused pain and suffering to the body, but to their mind and soul as well. They have to live with their physical impairment. Mr. Lamb has adjusted himself to the ways of the world and stopped bothering about what people call him. He keeps himself busy in meaningful activities like picking apples, making jelly, beekeeping, and preparing toffee from honey. He loves reading books, hearing music, observing beautiful things, and thinking about them. He inspires the small boy by saying that he has all the God given organs intact. He has to decide what to do. He must work for it, and then he can outshine even others. Then he admits that handsome is he who handsome does. For him, his face or how he looks does not matter now. He has become positive and has started thinking differently. Question number 4. What is the theme of the play on the face of it? How has it been worked out? The theme of the play is the consequences of physical impairment on the affected person's body, mind, and soul. The actual pain and inconvenience caused by the disability is often much less than the sense of alienation felt by the disabled person. People think that a person who has lost an organ or suffered some deformity, such as a disfigured face, should either be confined to the hospital or allowed to move in the company of people having the same disability. The playwright does not approve of this idea as it will create a strange sort of world. The attitude of persons towards the victims of accidents or disasters needs complete change. They must be considerate and thoughtful. They must appreciate the efforts of the physically challenged persons to overcome their disability and compete with others. The theme has been worked out through the interaction of two characters, old Mr. Lamb and a young boy, Derry. Through his peculiar way of looking at things and asking questions, Mr. Lamb persuades Derry to have a positive approach to life. Only positive attitude towards life will give one true happiness. Question number 5. Compare and contrast the characters of Mr. Lamb and Derry. This is a very important question. First of all, you have to compare them. You have to find the similarities and contrast. You have to find the differences. Both Mr. Lamb and the young boy Derry have one thing in common. That is their physical impairment, their physical disability. Both are victims of these disabilities after birth. The leg of Mr. Lamb was blown off during the war. Derry's face was burned by acid. One side of his face looked very ugly and frightful. Apart from this, they have nothing in common. Mr. Lamb is old. There is a young boy of 14. Mr. Lamb enjoys company and wants to talk. There is a way withdrawn and defiant. He does not want to come in contact with people. Mr. Lamb does not bother about his lameness. He has developed love for reading books, hearing music, seeing beautiful things, and thinking about them. He is calm and patient. He asks peculiar questions. He forces Derry to see that actions are more important than mere looks. In spite of his lameness, he picks apples, makes jelly, maintains a beehive, and makes toffees from honey. The gate of his garden is always open. He develops a new vision of life under his guidance. He becomes positive, and looks happy. The great transformation of dairy at the end. Thank you. Goodbye.